live here from the Microsoft MTC on January 29th, year 2020. I've got Andy Schwam right here to my left, but you're right on the screen. And we can see Rich Ross behind the camera. We're in a little bit of a different spot tonight, but we'll let Rich say hi first.
And a little bit of a delay, so hey everybody. We're working on the audio challenges. I think we got the video and the screens laid out nice. But for this one, they can't hear me and I can't hear them except for a bit of delay. So we'll play through this one and see how it goes. So I'll throw it back to Chris and Andy.
Yeah, hopefully my audio is coming through okay. We're doing a lot of different things here. We've got wireless mics. We're in a different set, and the reason is that we wanted to do at least a dry run of what it might be like to have an interview with a guest if we wanted to have more people. Yeah. On our normal set, 2 is we're a little close, and then 3 is a crowd.
So here, what you can't see, but next to me we have space as well.
Right.
And we can widen the camera.
Yeah, and I can even move over a little bit here. So
right. You're in the camera. That's the thing. Yes. Right. So we have another spot here, which you're not really seeing, but this table goes on, and we can then do 2 people sitting here, and 1 person sitting here. Yeah. And then we're set up for interviews, and so we had to do a dry run with lighting, with sound, and stuff like that. We don't have any backdrop yet.
No.
But we have some ideas for some stuff.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us once again, and. Like I said, we're going to try this out tonight and see how it goes. So hopefully, if you're watching us live, you're here with us, and you can let us know in the chat how you think it's going. And if you watch us on replay on YouTube, on our YouTube archive, then let us know in the comments. This is really the only way to do dry run. We've got to see how it goes because we have a very special guest in a couple of weeks.
This is big.
Yeah, this is big. We have Carl Franklin of .NET Rocks fame. So. Certainly it'll be great to have him here, and not just here. I think we'll talk a little bit about his current passion of Blazor, for sure, and then I just would love to just talk to him a little bit about the art of what we're doing here too, or just see what's on his mind when it comes to .NET. It doesn't necessarily just have to be one thing. So tonight, if you looked at our title for our show, we're talking about debugging, and there was a specific reason. This talk came up is that we were looking at some articles, some tips and tricks on debugging by a few folks. Some of them are Microsoft MVPs. Other folks are just longtime community leaders, community thought leaders, right? Mm-hmm. And part of how it came up is I think you had the blog post up there.
Yeah, well, I have one of them. There's 2, and I realized I didn't get the second one. But yeah, so here. We caught wind of this blog post. Is the one you're talking about here?
Yeah, so we have on Andy's screen, we have Steve Gordon's blog post.
Do you know Steve? I don't know Steve. He's an MVP. Yeah. I don't think I know him.
I'm not sure that I've met him.
But this is a good article. Rich, if you can bring up my screen so he can hear us. There it is. That is not the one. That's the wrong screen.
Although I think I can find it.
That's all right. He should be able to switch to mine. So we were reading a couple articles. All right, you're going to go for it? Yeah. That is not mine either. I've got my 3rd time's a charm. Boy, that looks bad, too. Looks really grainy. So I don't know if that's going to be all that valuable to our viewers. But we had this article that we found. I don't know if I saw it on LinkedIn or Twitter or something like that. And Steve's talking about becoming a better developer by reading source code. I thought this was a really good article. And then we have another article, which I want to bring up the second one that we're talking about. So you look for that and I look at this. We're going to talk about a couple of things. The other article was about how to be a better, you got the other one. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just Jeremy saying, talking about the secret art of debugging, and he talks about but what's interesting about both of these articles, they don't take it from the point of view of giving you IDE tips and tricks and make sure you do this and make sure you push this, remember this function key or this keyboard shortcut. I found it interesting that both of them, and we'll make sure we have links for these down in the comments on the YouTube show, but so that you can read these. I mean, you can even take a quick pause and read them through and come back and we'll talk about it. Is they both, even though the articles have different names, one says become a better developer by reading source code, in Jeremy article, The Secret Art of Debugging, he advocates reading the source code before you just mindlessly hit, I mean, because I'm sure I do it all the time. You just hit F5, say, let's just see, let's just let it rip. And I mean, how many times have you gone into a code base? I don't know if this is something you've ever done where you've gone into a code base where you just say, hey, we know there's something wrong. And you kind of say like, well, I know this is a pretty common spot that the code always has to go through. So let me put my first breakpoint there. And then I'll run it.
How many times did I do that today?
Yeah. And I think Jeremy's kind of saying like, don't start there.
Don't start there. Honestly, he's talking about getting back to good old-fashioned basics, right? Use your eyes, read the code, and think about it, and start at the beginning. That's another thing he talks about. Start at the beginning, and think about what the code's going to do. Because a lot of times, we think throw the breakpoint up at some place. We might have already missed it in the first place. Like we're just half the time we're wrong anyway. And I like that he was talking about getting back to basics. Just sort of develop that skill of being, sort of a detective on your own. Read through the code and figure out what you think it's supposed to do and what.
Yeah, I mean, part of the idea is that if you just run the debugger, you already have the expectation that the code works because you wrote it and you're going, or maybe you didn't write it. But the point is, you're starting from the backward point of view of code works, therefore we should be able to spot it whenever the breakpoint hits and I start looking at the variables and set watch values. I'll see what's wrong, but you don't. In that scenario, you frankly don't know what you're looking for. You're just waiting for something to be wrong. Where instead he brings up a little code snippet where he's trying to give you the example of, well, what if you cut and paste a property 2 times and you know that as you're doing it, take one tweak at a time, but you forget one of them. Well, you're going to look at that code the rest of the week, the rest of the month, and it's right in your brain still, even though it has the small typo or the small cut and paste problem.
Yeah. And Jeremy's a good guy. I mean, actually, think of it, I'm wearing my Tech Bash shirt.
Yeah,
and I'm not promoting Tech Bash. It's like a year. I'm not going to start promoting Tech Bash
He's spoken at Tech Bash.
I'm not even going to mention Tech Bash because I'm not promoting it.
Bash.
No, we won't even mention it. But Jeremy has been a speaker at Tech Bash, and so we know him. And this was a good article. Maybe this could be this is something we talked about even. Side note, one of the things we could do on this show is like mention articles we read. That wasn't really necessarily the purpose. We wanted to talk about debugging, but it's another thing to share as part of this little community that we're trying to build. Our viewers, us, they share articles with us. We can share articles with, if you have a good article about debugging, share it with us, and we'll talk about it now. But so the Secret Art of Debugging is it's a good article. It's a quick read. Talks about basically, here is one of the main things he says: train your eyes. It's good. He actually has some examples on here of some funny things, by the way, things that you may have seen before.
Yeah.
A couple of these things before. First thing he says is read this thing and count how many F's you have. Point is, he's not trying to say you can't pass the test or not. The point is to remind you that the eye sees what the brain wants it to see, right? And we don't always, we put bias to our vision or something like that. Like my brain is biasing it, unbeknownst to me, right? My brain is like working and screwing with my eyes and letting me see what I want to see. That's why they say start at the beginning. Don't take anything for granted. Start at the beginning and count, and look at each line of code, things like that.
Well, how many times have you, debugging your own code, wrote, this happened to me, that you may have spent minutes, even hours, and now you might have done the smart thing and called someone over and they immediately spot the obvious problem that you typed.
Mm-hmm.
And when you typed it, you sent the message from your brain to your
That's
fingers, right. And you messed something up, but we're thinking the right thing. So you might call someone over and they just go, well, wait a second, what is that? And let's say you do or don't do that, because I still feel in my head, I've had the same experience, same emotional experience where before my eyes, the code transforms to what I looked at so many times. and it was right. It was right.
Yeah, you can't
And then when
see
you came over and said, well, wait a second, man. Each of these is supposed to, like, let's just say you're supposed to loop through and take the first thing, but for some dumb reason, some like really ridiculous reason, the loop starts, but it haven't initialized the array yet or something. But in my brain, I did it. I set X.
You know you did.
I did it.
The problem is you know you did it,
right,
but you didn't do it.
and I even see it. But then
Because
you come
you
over and you
thought
go,
about
well,
doing
look, it's not here. And then it's like before it just transforms.
Right.
You're right, it's gone. What happened? Who changed it? But you know. Just go, man, I needed another
how did I not
set of
see that?
eyes.
Yeah.
The other debugging technique, which actually last weekend I participated as a mentor in a codeathon that was held at the high school. There were approximately 30 students there, some of them writing their very first lines of code ever, and they were building websites for the first time.
Really?
But the reason I relate this is because here is a student never written code before. And I know Andy hasn't heard this story already, but when you hear it, I expect nodding. I just really do. So he came to me and he was really nice. He was really nice. He said, Mr. Gomez, can you help me? I said, sure. Look, I didn't know what he needed help with. He said, so I don't know why, we're talking HTML, CSS. I don't know why this font isn't style that I've set it up. Because look, here's my CSS and here's my HTML, and I have the link statement that's pulling in that CSS, and it was correct. He was right. And then let's go back to the CSS, and I have here's the class that I have over on that element, and I want members of this class in the HTML to have this font size and this. And he stopped and looked at it and he went, well, wait a second. Went back to the HTML. Class name was misspelled, HTML. And he looked up at me and he said, oh, I'm really sorry. And I stopped him and I said, no, what you just did
That's the head nod.
Happens all the time in software. You brought someone over so you could talk it out to them, and in the process of doing that, solve your problem. Don't be embarrassed. You just did something professional developers do every day.
Right.
So congratulations.
Congratulations.
And then there was another mentor there who said, like, yeah, it's like talk to the duck. And you've heard that term.
Talk to the duck.
Yeah, it's sort of called speaking it to the duck or explaining it to the duck. It came from another book of techniques where a developer who recognized, in fact, we could probably find it. It might even be in the Pragmatic Programmer, but I'm going to feel awful if it wasn't in that book. That another developer recognized that this art of talking out someone else solves problems. So he got a rubber duck and he put it on his desk. And instead of calling you over, it's a duck.
Yeah, I Googled it and I see a couple articles, but I don't know if I'm finding the real story.
Rubber duck debugging is the term now. And he tells it to the duck.
Because you got to tell it to somebody.
And he goes, oh, hold on, I got it, right? And I forget which book it was first brought up in. And to me, that's, we're talking about debugging techniques. Oddly enough, just trying to explain what you did to someone else is a debugging technique.
It works so often for me. And the problem is, just like this young individual that you're working with, kind of feels stupid because you're like, I looked at this for an hour and I bring you over, I bother you, I come and get you over and I say, take a look at this. And I go, see what it's supposed to do, and you immediately catch it all the time. But listen, on the other side, sometimes that doesn't work. But I've already called you over, look at my code, and I explain it to you, and then you see it sometimes immediately. And again, that's a great tool also. A great tool is, we talk about paired programming and stuff like that, right? Ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I always, there's a time limit you put on things. Like, I don't like people that just call you over right away. Oh my God, I got a problem. Chris, come here, solve it for me. Okay. No, Chris, I've been on this problem for a certain amount of time. Time to phone a friend. Time to call in, let's call it phone a friend, right? Let's bring somebody else in to take a look at that. That's another really good tip. And that's one of the hard things I think that people have that work solo. They don't have that other resource to reach out to.
Right.
And when you work as a team, and we do paired programming, all those different kind of things that are really helpful, sometimes just having someone else coming over and look at it is going to also help find the problem. But It's a good article. And so and it kind of goes hand in hand. I don't know if we want to jump articles, but it kind of goes hand in hand sort of with this other article we were talking about, right? That I can bring up, which I think is the one I had up earlier, which is the Gordon article, which is about, he says, become a better developer by reading.
Yeah.
Right? And this is something I'm not knocking. I don't think Steve's the first person to say this. You know, we've heard this before. He's doing a great service and promoting this concept and telling people to do it. This is a really good idea. Now, I will admit, this is not something I do often. Not in this random way. I'll read source code from my peers at work and people like more from like a code review standpoint, which I think is a valuable skill as well.
Right.
But I don't often do this thing where you go to, he's basically saying, you know, you go to GitHub, and I've heard other people say this too, especially with regard to some of the Microsoft source code, which is open source. You know, a lot of stuff is out there. You can just start reading through it, find out how it works.
So this is slightly different from what we've been saying, which is the value of having teammates help you debug something by looking at the code itself. And notice tonight, this sort of leads into the topic a little bit. If one thing we will not cover tonight is debugging tips in an IDE or in a tool.
Right.
I think that's a great show.
Oh, yeah.
But it's just not going to be this show. This is a little bit more abstract of, you know, what is the art of debugging? And I think we can talk a little bit about using it.
There's great tools out there. And don't get me wrong, lean on those tools because a lot of them are time savers. But you know, if you can't get it, you got to have some skills, and we got to have some skills.
But the slight pivot, I think, from the first article, the Secret Art of Debugging by Jeremy, this article, Steve's, the slight pivot here is saying, just as you might read for enjoyment and improvement, we should read source code for improvement. I think he begins. Does he talk a little bit about how the way you learn to write is to read? For example, in the paragraph, and we should all read the article. I'm not going to certainly much of this, but he says, let's think for a moment about how young children learn to read and write. Book Young Learners by Carolyn Lynch. She states that you need to read a word before you can write it. And so the conclusion is that are we expected to just sit down and write source code when we haven't read source code that does what we want to do?
Right.
And that is an innovative thought that I've been doing this a long time.
No, I've never thought about.
And I've never thought about, before I set out to write something, maybe I should go read from a project trying to do a similar thing. I've actually never thought about that before. So I think that's and we have that power today, which we probably didn't have in our career. Just go, well, let's just go read how someone else did it. How would you do it?
No, it was closed. I mean, no one would show you their source code. Like, companies weren't just sharing.
Even if there was somebody willing to, where are they? In some other state, some other, how would you find them, right? So at least now, something like GitHub, you can say, well, I kind of want to, and I'm totally making this, I kind of want to do what this open source project's doing. How did they do it?
Right.
And you can look at it, and then you can make the decision. I suppose we could just do that ourselves, or maybe we should take on that project, reference it. That might even help you make that kind of decision.
You may find you don't like what you do.
Sure.
Which isn't a bad thing either. You see some things and you say, you know, I get what they're going for here, but I think they could do it differently, and you could get some things. But where we think the correlation between the articles is they're both sort of about training your eye and like that. Reading source code, I would think that the more you read source code, better that bugging skill you're going to have. That, like, especially because if you're reading source code, what I think you're getting good at is understanding what something does, right? What someone else is, right? Code should be, you hope your code's readable, but you're going to go through it and you're going to sort of you're thinking about it differently than when you're writing it yourself, right? But I think you could apply that same skill then if you could train your brain to switch gears and say, I want to read my source code in the debugging aspect. I want to go back to my source code and read it like I didn't write it. Read it like I'm coming to it for the first time, and try to understand what this code does, right? If you could sort of make that mental switch in your brain, which it's just too hard
it might
to do.
be hard, but maybe train yourself.
Train yourself to be able to look at code with a fresh perspective, or, quite frankly, the better you are at reading source code, the more you're going to be able to help your coworkers as well, and your friends and things like that.
So the fact that there are so many sources of open places to read source code, GitHub, blog posts, Stack Overflow, more and more, really leads into Bruno's point, who joins us tonight and
hey, Bruno.
says it's a good time to be an aspiring developer. There's so many good sources of content. It's true.
Unbelievable.
At the dawn of the .NET framework, we couldn't read base class library, but today we can go to .NET framework reference and we can read, presumably, what's in. And we're not talking .NET Core yet, which is a truly open source. I'm talking .NET Framework, which I think if Scott Hansen were here, he would say is source open. Like, we're not going to contribute to it. We're not going to contribute to it. But you can go to the .NET reference and you can see, which I have done for a few issues. And it's not because, it wasn't even because I said to myself, no, I'm going to go copy what they did. Honestly, when it came to .NET Framework and when this .NET Framework reference became available, I wanted to understand more clearly how Microsoft internally made certain choices. For example, at the dawn of async, I wanted to understand, when do they make the choice to call it async method or not use the async method?
Right.
And I actually did go hunt through the .NET Framework reference source, try and understand their decision. There was another time where, and this had to do with, it wasn't with security. I don't want to overstate what this was about. It was about selecting security protocols like TLS and so on, which you can do in code. And however, I had just read this article that was a best practices discussion, and this was an article by Microsoft. And they talked about how they made this article segmented. You're on 4.7 and above, we recommend this. If you're on if you're below, we recommend something else because of the change we made. And I went, really? So I actually went and compared it, and I went, sure enough, they changed how they did things in 4.7. Wow, this is important. This is huge. And besides just the documentation, which clearly I could have trusted, I felt I wanted that extra understanding of, like, why? What is happening? What did they do? Just in case somebody asked, and that became an important thing. So there was a case where, without thinking about it, I decided to learn more. I'd better go look at the source. That's not quite the same thing as debugging, but it does fit along with the idea of, don't want to just blindly trust the documentation. There's only one source of truth in this world when it comes to programming.
There's only one source of truth.
It's the actual code.
That well, and so now luckily we live in the DevOps world nowadays, because there was a time when you weren't always so sure you could trust the code.
Is this the code that's actually running?
Is this the code that's actually running? I think it's far more likely to be code that's running now in the DevOps world we live in. But that's a sort of side note.
And I think that's that's another show. So we talked a little bit about this idea of reading code, right, and so on. So one of the things that I do think is important, and we'll focus a little on .NET here, is we have some pretty tremendous tools. I don't think we're not gonna dive into it, but I think most experienced .NET developers set breakpoints. Do you use watches out of the gate, or do you kind of wait?
Oh, well, if here's the thing, right? Are you putting a watch in advance? If you're putting the watch in advance, then you're sort of making some kind of guess at where you think the problem is, right? Or you can be wrong. I think Jeremy, in his article, was saying, if you put the watch in, sort of making this guess that where the problem is.
Sure.
And again, there's times when there's different skills work. I'm not saying he's 100% right, 100% wrong, anything like that.
All right.
Good article, good food for thought, right? All these things are like food for thought and like adding to your tool belt, so to speak, right? Whether you do something 100%. But I think he was saying you're sort of making, he would say in his article, you're making a guess. And by not putting anything in, but making sure you go to the beginning and think about what each thing does. But of course,
let's say we're going to use tools.
No, but even then, yeah.
It's not discounting the article at
all.
No,
I mean, watches are great.
Right. So
there's a lot of these things.
So first thing, what's the first thing out of your tool belt? Is it breakpoint? I think I want to see what's happening here.
Oh, yeah. To me, it's a breakpoint. hover over a variable, hover over something, and we're
which
not,
is the instant watch.
yeah, I guess.
And if you decide, hey, this is pretty important, because this is probably how I think. Believe me, I haven't sat down and really examined how I do this. This is probably how I think, is I set the breakpoint because I say, I'm pretty sure I want to observe what's happening here. I want to open the box and what's going on.
Yeah.
And then I'll, just like you, hover over values, and one of them might be like, you know what? I'd better watch this.
That's
one.
an interesting one, right?
I better hang on to this.
That seems like it might be.
I wonder if this is the one that ends up null or empty or whatever. And so go out of watch.
Or it is null.
Sure, it's already null.
And you're like, well, that's my problem. Well, if you got a null reference exception, you're going to try to figure out like when did it become null or something like that.
Now, there's a powerful feature in Visual Studio, right? Breakpoint with conditions.
Yeah.
You use it often.
You know what? It's one of those things that it's not my first thing that I'm going to go to.
I'm with you.
It's one of those tools that it's going to be a few iterations before I start to think like, hey, I need to do that. Because usually my first instinct is to run through the code, try to make that condition happen, and try to get to that. And eventually you start to think, what if I just turn on that condition thing and just run the thing in so many ways and let's see when does that finally happen. But
for me, it comes up when you hit a piece of code that, yes, it is the place you want to be observing, but you're stopping there 20 times before you get to your use case. And not only your use case, it turns out that this is such an important use piece that before it even gets to your use case, it got ran through 20 times by another. So you go, hold on a second, I do want to stop here, but I'd better like come up with a condition that says we're at your stop.
Yeah.
Instead of every stop, right?
Right. Especially when you have 1,000 things in a loop or something like that. It's kind of crazy. By the way, I just thought of something, and we should think about some of these things for demos that we're going to do, because we said we want to talk about tooling. One of the things I want to put a mental note is how to put a breakpoint on a setter. When you have like a
property setter.
A property setter that doesn't have any code. It's just like get set.
Okay.
And there's no way to put a breakpoint on those things, essentially, but you can do tooling.
Okay.
I've done it in a while, but like that would be a good.
We'll have to remember that one.
Show, yeah.
So another thing you can do debugger just by besides looking at memory, and this, I think this isn't just a Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code. I mean, you can talk about Eclipse, you can talk about whatever.
How about the browser?
Yes.
Right.
How
Debugging
about
in the browser,
right? Is you could change the value.
Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes I don't think people realize you can do that.
Right.
Or like it doesn't come to them right away. But I've had times where I'll change the value. I'll get to a spot and it's just not, the thing's not happening. And like, what if I change this value?
Yeah.
And then you're like, then the thing.
What if an even number came in here? Or what if something else came here? Or you say to yourself, I see what the problem is. But before I fix that code and find out that that's not the only issue, what if I just fix the string? Like, if the input was good, would this have worked? Right. And then of course you might decide how is that going to guide you going forward. So here's where I think some worlds collide. Right? There's another thing. We don't necessarily have to. We can use the debugger, but there are some other techniques that existed even before debuggers, right? How about just plain old print statement? Let's write it to the log.
I'm never proud when I go. I'll be honest.
Isn't that interesting though? How we are not.
Well,
we are taught to not be proud of just adding another.
I think what bothers me is that I'm even in some way I'm changing code.
Okay.
To bug.
Okay.
Sure, I'm adding a print statement. There are some weird times when you write something and you could print something and you could affect it because maybe you're executing. Let's say if you had some values. I don't know. I'm trying to think of something off the top of my head, but like entity framework stuff. You go, oh, you know what I'll do? I'll display some of those things. Right, just a print line. Wait, but what did I just do? I just executed the query.
Execute query
because right. Or I could put like you could increment a count by trying to print it out. So there's some side effects you could cause with that. But I always feel like I shouldn't need to print, but there are times the tool that's in our fallback.
Yeah.
You know.
I think all of us probably feel that that's what we had to do.
Well, it used to be. Oh my
Yeah.
God! It used to be crazy.
Yeah, right to the console, because what other
Yeah.
choice did you have?
What else did you have, right?
And now,
especially when there was a loop,
Sure.
you just want to say, well, let's see all those values in it.
And so now, you know, if we get in this really bad spot where the problem's in production and don't even know where to begin replicating dev, and heck, worst case scenario, you never actually end up replicating it anywhere else. So do you start right into the logs? Have you ever been in that
production
meeting?
where you want the production data
Okay,
to log in?
let's we're not sure what's wrong. So what if we logged a few more things, pushed that out to production?
Yeah,
That's still debugging.
that's happened. That is debugging, and there's also the remote debugger. You know, again, we're talking about tools. There's remote debugging, which is like attaching to production or something like that.
Okay, well,
I haven't done that in a
I was gonna
long
say,
time.
like, is that desperation time, or?
Yeah, well, that might be the last.
I can understand a lot of places where you might debug, you might remote debug into a dev environment or something that you might call a QA environment.
Yeah.
And I'm making these terms up. You might call them different things in your place, but we all kind of have.
But I mean, I'll admit, I have debugged production. I'm sure you've done it once.
I think probably.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't give you the war story right now, but
you were asking about you know, I think I jumped ahead.
Add more logging.
Add more logging. Yeah, definitely have done that. Definitely have done that, and then you're just trying to gather evidence at that point because you're really not sure. That's again, these are getting towards not necessarily last resort.
I think there are things we're not proud of. Because you kind of recoil and go like, oh yeah, I know that time when we added some logging and we sort of, but you feel like, God, you should have been able to do something else. Even if we solved the problem and saved the day, or, you know, I still think for some reason it's considered not the best approach to like add print statements, add logging. Like, shouldn't you be able to debug this? Shouldn't the error have been good enough? Or
well, you start adding more try-catch blocks around things. Is that another thing you've done? Let's add some more try-catch and put that in production. You know, that's something that's happened in the past too. But I don't know if I've been in too many of those circumstances lately. Luckily, I think that.
So I think a companion to this, there's a lot of, and this is like a whole other topic, is a lot of folks would say, you know, instead of that change and pray approach. Right? If you have
just make that up?
I actually don't. If I tried to claim that, I believe that's wrong.
Okay.
I don't believe that I'm the only person that has said that. That we may find that phrase in Michael Feather's book or in a Bob Martin book.
Okay.
But speaking of Bob Martin, he himself would say, well, you know, if you had robust testing, automated testing, unit testing, then you would say we have a problem. Let's write a test that covers it. Execute the tests, and we're confident, fearless, go to production. Now, there's an art and a Zen state that your project's got to get to, because I'm sure a lot of people have felt let down, saying, well, we tried that and just couldn't test our way out of it.
Yeah, that's depressing. You know, when you think you have good code coverage and hard to think of all the circumstances, but then you learn from that. But the first thing you should do then is write the test, have the bug, right? Before you fix it. That's a sort of a secondary thing, but before you fix it, a bug. Now you found that you think you know what the problem. You found that line of code, and you go, oh, there it is. But a great time to write a unit that will fail.
Yeah.
Then fix the code, let the test pass. Now you've got more code.
Right.
So that's a good thing to do.
So we'll see if we can get Rich to bring up my screen here, because I think as always, go to XKC, put it in perspective, right?
I don't even know what XKC do.
XKC is a comic that very, very commonly writes about programming and coding topics, and I always feel like we can find something relevant there.
Cool.
And so in this particular comic, we can see the programmer trying to figure out issue and Googles the error, finds one result, a thread by someone with the same problem and no answer, last posted to in 2003. Who were you, Denver Coder 9? What did you see?
Yeah.
I just love that, because the thing about what makes me laugh so much, I've been there.
Yeah.
I've Googled for the answer and gotten onto some forum, and somebody describes the exact same thing on the exact. I mean, everything's the same. Everything's the same. I got the same error, the same OS. I'm trying to do the same exact thing,
right?
And then somebody, you might get one response that was like, "Well, did you try to like fob the knob?"
And it ends, and you think to yourself, did he solve or did she solve the problem? Did they get it? Tell me the answer.
Are they okay?
Right. Did they live? It's a cliffhanger.
It's like Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Right.
Ah.
So
I don't have that clip.
no, but that would be so. Yeah, that's a depressing when there's times when you're Googling and you're just not getting the answer.
Yeah.
So is that another skill? Like, what is the right thing?
Power Googling?
Well, it is power Googling. Like, how to ask the right question. How to go to Stack Overflow and if you thought to yourself, if I put in another word, let's say you're doing some kind of process, you think you're a synonym. Like if I change one word in my search, get the answer, and you try like hundreds of ways to do it, just can't get there, But then eventually, I don't know.
I've actually, when I've been asked, especially sometimes by younger folks, they'll seem to look at you and marvel and say like, "Gosh, how did you know?" Go, "No, trust me, I didn't know anything. I just Googled." But then here's the great response: is, "How did you know what to Google? Because I did
that's what
that."
I'm saying, yeah.
And the problem that I kind of have here, I have not figured out how to. And it bothers me a little bit.
Well, the answer is experience. I've been doing this longer than.
But that's awful. Here's somebody asking me for advice, saying, "How do you know what to Google?" And that's the worst. That's the least answer I want to give to somebody, because now it makes them feel smaller. Like, oh, I'll never have the wisdom of the ancients, like the name of that comic, and I don't want to feel like an oracle because I'm not. And I'm sitting here going, I don't know. I don't know what happened there, but sure enough, and here's another thing. Not only did I Google, when the results came up, how did I know to go to the fifth one, as that was the most promising?
Yeah.
It's not midichlorians.
It's hunch. I mean, it's no. I mean,
many times that hasn't worked.
There's something. You
have confirmation bias for all the times it did work, and you forget about all the times.
Yeah, well, you feel really good about. Oh, of course I got it. But
you forget about all the other times that you were on page 6 and you still didn't know.
But your instincts improve over time. Just like you write better code, hopefully that has less bugs, and you get better at spotting these things. Now I want to say something negative here.
Okay.
Because we've been talking about positive.
Yeah.
We're talking about positive solutions. How about the flip side? I'm sorry, I'm gonna be like the grumpy old man here, but like, how about when someone comes to you and I'm hesitant to say this. You don't want to discourage from people for help.
Yeah.
But how many times does it happen where somebody comes and asks you a question, you go, I don't know. Let me Google it.
Yeah, right.
And you Google it, and like nothing at all. And it comes right up on the first thing. And you say, did you even Google it? And they're,
yeah.
And I'm like, you got to put a little time in. So let me tell you, the website, let me Google that for you.
Yes, right.
It's one of my favorites. And I've been known on occasion to use that as a link when I say, oh, here's the link. I found the problem for you. And if you send, I don't know if you guys have ever seen Let Me Google that for you.
Yeah, I've seen it generates a link for you.
Yeah,
right?
this is one of my favorites.
So
I just think it's so
over
funny.
To Andy
I'm going to go to Let Me Google that for you.
But no, I've seen this.
Here it is coming up.
Go to the other one.
Oh, God. He keeps going to the wrong. Come on. Mine's the MD, I don't know, some weird number. I don't know. Can't get my. Here it is. There it is. Okay. So let me Google that for you. This is just, now we're being obnoxious.
They have like a whole UI now.
They've got this whole thing. It's not just for Google. And so I want to say I'm going to use Google as a default, right? I can use it. Let me bring that
interesting.
For and so let's say.
Meta it, but let me Google that for you.
Oh, yeah, I guess so.
Interesting.
So now, I don't know, we would have to look for a problem like how to set all caps in word. I don't know. It's probably like I'm just trying to think of something that would be kind of simple, right?
Yeah.
Someone says, "Hey,
I come up to you and say,
I
how do you
can't-
make this?
How do you
all
change
caps?"
more? How about change margin? Right? How to not even doing a coding thing. How to change margin, no word doc. Someone says, "I can't figure out how to do this." Type this in, and you search for it, and well, here it is.
Get a link though. The whole idea is link,
Yeah.
which I wonder if you had
Did I
to
do
do that
something
back.
wrong? Yeah. Did I do it? Oh, here it is. Wait. Oh, get link, right?
Yep.
So first you do it, you have to check, and you say,
Okay.
"Oh, okay, this is it," and it's the top one, right? And you send them this get link, or you can do a preview first. And so what happens is you send somebody the link,
This
and they're
is
going to
what-
get
this is what
this
they
link.
get.
Yeah, and you can actually change it to not be like
Right.
Apple.
But
it says,
it'll
look,
do it-
it shows like click here, saying, "Where's my mouse?"
Yeah.
Oh, I don't have my mouse.
But it's
on the thing.
obnoxious.
It's
Step
really
one,
obnoxious.
Well, step 2, type your question.
Yeah, right. Here
Step
it is.
3,
Here's your
click the
and
button.
look, that's it.
Yeah.
That's all you have to do. And so if you get a link, go back to this thing, and I get the link, and I send it to somebody, and they open it up, and yeah, they get this. This is what they get. They get
I mean,
this thing.
I know people
it plays through.
who wouldn't even bother taking that step. In the old days, they would just be like, they would type that out right in the chat, LMG.
Oh yeah. Let me
because they
Google-
figure
yeah.
that's what
Right.
you probably want to do.
Yeah.
So, in any
But that's
case,
sort of the negative side. I mean, I'm venting a little bit here because we do want to help.
Right.
And maybe I had the Google terminology that was just better. Maybe they didn't think of the word margin, they were thinking of the word border, something like that. And
Right.
They only thought of that one word change, but can have a little fun with let me Google that for you. I'm closing up my browser window here. So you want to, yeah. So, hey, by the way, if you're here on the show now, I want to take an opportunity to remind you, do us a favor and follow us on Mixer or Twitch. And if you're on YouTube, whether now or in the archives, please subscribe to our channel. And I'm supposed to do one of these things, like hit the button, but I never remember where those things are. Hit the button. I don't.
Well, I think on Twitch, if I remember correctly, follows over there, and on Mixer, it's down there.
It's down here. Yeah,
And
yeah,
then
right.
On
YouTube, I think
we want
it's-
the red subscribe button,
Yeah, the red
so that you
I
get
think
notifications when we
that
go
might be
live
over
or we
here, I don't
post a
know.
new archive video. And if this is a topic, if these are the kinds of topics you want to hear more about, then on the great thing on YouTube, like this video, then we get to see immediately, like, hey, not only get certain views, we also, a lot of people say, yeah, this is the kind of discussion we want to see. So definitely make sure. And if you're watching this in the future, then thanks for joining us on YouTube. And we've got our viewer Bruno here that joined us tonight live. And hey, think about joining us live Wednesday, 30 time.
You can join the conversation, ask a question, or not even ask a question. We don't have all the answers. I'd like to learn something. You might say, hey, here's a tip for you about debugging, Andy, Chris. Do you know you could try such and such? Oh, thanks so much. Now, we're in this community. We're trying to build a community. We're trying to find a way where we're all kind of learning and collaborating. And that's what's going on in a lot of these environments, Mixer, Twitch, YouTube, these live instead of just writing something and recording it, which is great, we do that. We're going to record these and watch them later, but we want to have it be live. We want to have that opportunity for collaboration, sharing, and things like that.
Yeah. Yep. So,
What else is going on?
we talked a lot about, I think what we've partially covered, the topic was art and science, right? So we did go through some tips, and then we talked about the art of it because, I just Googled for something, or I just sort of felt that this is how we would find the answer.
That's the witchcraft.
Yeah.
Art, science, and witchcraft.
That's
maybe should be
the voodoo part of
the
it.
voodoo part, yeah.
But I do want to talk a little bit about and this isn't the only person I've heard this from, but I think the most famous person is it goes by Uncle Bob. So if you're not familiar with Robert C. Martin, he has in the industry, he has kind of developed the name Uncle Bob.
Oh yeah.
And
Everybody knows Uncle Bob.
his blog used to be called But Uncle Bob. Sorry, But Uncle Bob. I believe he blogs now at the Clean Coders blog. And one of the things that he has been espousing for a very long time, I would say probably for at least 20 years now, is test-driven development.
Oh, test-driven.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now I have seen him say, find many of his test-driven development videos, plenty of them are out there on presentation after presentation, where he says, you know, I'm not going to argue with you if you write the code first and then write the test right after, or if you write the test first and write the code right after. It's about them in proximity, very important. And I have seen he has I think just stopped short of saying debuggers considered harmful. There's a blog post from him in 2003. Buggers are a wasteful time sink, right? And he says, hey, a good debugger is a great tool. You can step through complex code. You can look at variables, data structures. You could look at call stacks. You could modify code or values right now. There's just a ton of things you can do. Here's this quote. And yet, for all their power, debuggers have done more to damage software development than help it. Since I started,
statement.
I agree, it's a strong statement. Since I started using test-driven development in 1999, I have not found a solution for a debugger. Kinds of bugs I have to troubleshoot are easily isolated by my unit tests and can be found through inspection and a few judiciously placed print statements.
No, I'm just, as you're saying that, thinking about the example we talked about earlier, where we said, what if you have a loop, something like that, and there's 1,000 options going there, and the bug is probably happening when I don't know. Let's say there's a field called. I'm trying to think of a simple example, right? And when the first name is Zeb, maybe that's where you're getting the problem, right? And so you got to run through this thing from Andy, Chris. You're going through all these names, whatever. I mean, silly example. But
Sure,
the point is,
but it happens.
I could write a unit test and say, pass Zeb into this method. I could get right to it in a unit test. I think that's kind of what he's saying is figure it out.
Right. Use the test-driven development approach, right?
Use the test-driven development approach to find it. You can always write another, right? And that's not a technique I use all that often. I mean, I've been known to write a test once I sort of have found the problem, but the test to find the problem. And he's saying actually that test-driven development and you have a good enough coverage, you shouldn't really have.
That's what he's saying.
But that's.
And I would love. I wish I couldn't find the clip of him where he says this in person because I think it would have been a powerful clip to play. It is in an introduction to test-driven development.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to show these folks, here's how you do it. And he says, don't become good at the debugger. That's not the skill to become the debugger. I'll read the conclusion here, and we'll make sure we put the article link. I consider debuggers to be a drug, an addiction. Programmers can get into the horrible habit of debugger instead of on their brain. My humble opinion, a debugger is a tool of last resort. Once you have exhausted every other avenue of diagnosis and have given very careful thought to just rewriting the code, then you may need a debugger.
Yeah, listen, so he makes a good point there, right? But if I want to be thinking about, so Bruno says, one word still scares me about debug.
Win debug.
Right. That's from a while ago, probably, right? I think we might have missed that.
Some
comment.
people still,
I
think, have to use debug.
So but there are circumstances. It's easy to say that. You're working on a new code base or something like that. You might have something old that you just can't really refactor to make it totally testable. Like, let's just be fair. We know there's plenty of applications out there that are like legacy code, whatever you mean, whatever
without test.
Code without test, code that wasn't written to be testable, and maybe the debugger can be different in those cases. It's easy to say, oh, I've got, this application is 15, we started it 6 months ago, and it's got all the perfect, and I can do that, and so I think that. Uncle Bob's trying to make a point, right? And he's not here to talk about it, right?
We're being totally.
He's trying to make a point, and so sometimes when you want to make a point, you have to say strong statements, stuff like that. And so, that's all good from a presentation. There's circumstance, right? And I guess we want to be fair and not have people sit and think, well,
oh no, that's not the conclusion of the show.
Yeah, that's not.
It's just I just posited 3 questions to talk about because I said, hey, clearly debugging is science, but there's also an art to it.
Yeah.
And then here we have a leader in the industry saying, man, get away from the debugger.
Yeah.
And obviously he's trying to tell you, set yourself up for that lifestyle
Yeah.
by espousing test-driven development. That's clearly the track he's trying to lead you to.
And there's nothing wrong with, unit testing is great. Matter of fact, on my show today, Kwame streams noon on Wednesdays.
On Wednesdays.
As I wink to the camera, you probably couldn't see. Noon on Wednesdays. I talked about unit testing today. Now, I tend to be anti-TDD, frankly, because I think TDD means test first. First is like a really hard thing to do. It's interesting. He's saying, or maybe you're paraphrasing. I don't remember that part.
We'd have to find that article.
TDD, whether you do it before or after.
Yeah.
And to me, if you're doing it after, that's not really.
Well,
But it is still hardcore testing. You want to be pro. I'm very pro testing. TDD.
It's just something that he says in one of his videos where he's teaching test-driven development, and he pauses for a second and says, "It wouldn't have bothered me if you wrote this test and wrote this code, or if you had written the code and then immediately wrote the test. It's in proximity." Very important to him, which has nothing to do with debugging, and we'll probably cover that more on a unit testing show. So yeah, I think what we get out of this that it might be useful to run through debugging tips, but what we mostly concentrated on was, the art of debugging begins with being able to read source code. And I think that the thought-provoking blog posts, both Jeremy Lickness, Steve Gordon, got us thinking about that, saying, even though it was interesting because when you read an article that says the secret art of debugging, I half expected to start seeing secrets in the IDE, and none of that at all.
Is that clickbait?
No,
I'm just kidding. Because he led you to think one thing, but that's the hook. That was a good article.
It was none of that at all.
Right, it wasn't.
It was basically, hey, train your eyes to spot problems. Read the source code again. Make sure when you cut and paste, can you spot bugs? Can you spot bugs that are minute differences in code? And the examples where can you spot the Fs in that paragraph or and so on?
That great example with the gorilla. Oh, your screen is up on the.
Yeah, no, it's fine. And then of course as soon as it came up, I accidentally switched to the desktops. And then he even the last point, don't just blindly trust the documentation.
Right.
Don't read
you
the code.
said that before. Yeah.
And then so now you have somebody talking passionately about reading the code. Doesn't that also mean becoming a better developer by reading source code? They go together, and it'll improve your debugging experience. So let us know what you think about debugging in the comments on YouTube right below. And thanks to the folks who joined us live. We will be back. We're going to try a show next week, but we know it's going to be a remote show.
Remote show.
So we're going to give that a shot. Follow us on Twitter, the Dev Talk Show. Should do a much better job of posting that show's going to be on.
Well, we don't do a good job of promoting our show.
We've got to get a little better. And then we know that on February 12th, right after Carl Franklin's Laser Roadshow at Philly.net, if you are watching this and you're in the Philly.net community or you know about our .net community and you like to come to the
meetups, in the Philly area,
or anywhere in the Philly area, you need to be here. LaserRoadshow.com over on Andy's machine there. And
LaserRoadshow.com.
Be here at 6 p.m. You can't miss this.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. I mean, we've got Carl Franklin. I say that here's the thing. Yeah, BlazerRoadshow.com. You can see all the different. Listen, even if you're not in the Philly area, by the way,
there's other ones.
Check out all these different places that Carl's going. Carl's awesome, right? And everything we do here, sort of like on Carl's shoulders. This, .NET Rocks is really the grandfather of all these
of podcasts and shows
in .NET and things like that.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it, which is why we're so excited to spend some time with us after Laser Roadshow.
Yeah.
We're going to
and we're scared
think very hard about what we're going to talk to.
We're going to ask Carl.
About.
Yeah, right. It's like it's like I don't know. It's like when
someone who you.
I was going to say like when
I feel like I learned kind of how to maybe the things you say to open and close a show. Just little things like that.
I feel like like somebody like Jimmy Kimmel would feel like the first time Letterman came on his show.
He's going to interview Johnny Carson.
Or Jack Parr, Johnny Carson, right? Yeah, exactly.
Interview one of the greats,
that's the way we feel.
So,
Rich, what do you got to say? You're on the camera.
So just one quick note about Carl and the event we're going to do here next week. But we're going to definitely have him on. That's going to be awesome. Typically, Philly.net event, live stream those. Right now it's looking can't live stream.
Right.
So if you want to see Carl, and I think a lot of people do, need to be out here.
Yep.
We've got room to use the meetup to sign up and plan to be here in person just in case we can.
Right.
Good point.
That's a good point. So that as of right now, and you know, it's Carl's being sent on the road by our friends at DevExpress. Certainly, the content is super valuable. Carl himself does full day workshops on this topic. I mean, he's really evangelizing Blazor. So you'll want to be here, but then we'll get to talk to him. We'll talk to him live. So join us and ask questions and comments on Mixer, Twitch, or YouTube. And so we're really looking forward to that. But I think for tonight we got to test out our setup for that exact reason.
Yeah.
So we can have extra guests here. We can still have Rich in the studio. So working out a few kinks, a few bugs, as you saw. But you know what? I want to thank everybody for joining us, whether you watched this here and we're now in your past on YouTube, or if you joined us live tonight on Mixer Twitch. So if that's it, then
that's the show.
We'll go ahead and for Rich Ross, for Andy Schwamm, I'm Chris Gomez, and thank you for joining us on the Dev Talk Show.